Hello and welcome to Processing Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have with me Alivia Cooper, a fellow CPCU. We met at InterRisk this year, uh, and you are actively employed within the insurance industry. But I don't want to mention what you do or your company. You're free to talk about that if you want to. But really, the reason we're chatting today is because you are the president and CEO of the FitzLane project. So first of all, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to connect at Into Risk. It was actually my first one going. I earned my CPCU earlier this year, so it was an exciting time and got to meet amazing people.
Congratulations. So I'll I'll definitely have you kind of talk about what FitzLane is, but I do want to give it just a small introduction. Uh, so basically, you're working to help our industry understand trans issues, and not only that, but you guys provide a bunch of services to the trans community itself. So pretty cool stuff, and just kind of as an introduction. So I've been in the industry for 12 years, and myself as a straight cisgendered male, uh, I, I graduated college 12 and a half years ago. And no, a little more longer than that at this point, like 16 years ago, 12 and a half in insurance. But
It goes
the
by quick.
yeah, no kidding. Turning 40 today, which we talked about before we started recording. But basically, the reason I'm kind of giving the background as to who I am is it when I went to college in 02 through 06, LGTB was already a big issue, but the T got very, 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 very little mention, if any at all, right? So basically, I made it to the working world with very little awareness beyond like the existence of transgender people out there. Uh, then it wasn't until and I've been very involved in the DEI side of insurance when it comes to like kind of the racial and the age side. But it wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, reading one of Amy Waninger's Lead at Any Level articles, that I even ran into the word cis, which I literally had to ask what it meant, right? And we're just talking like 5 years ago. So basically, what I'm trying to say is if for me, being kind of younger for our industry and having always been pretty active in the DEI space, if for me this is all pretty new and a little bit harder to get my head around, in our very conservative industry, you're very much leading the way, basically. So I I'll let you kind of tell the story. So what is the FitzLane project?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say you hit the nail on the head, and I can touch on that in a little bit. But really, the FitzLane Project at its core is we're a nonprofit organization that provides free LGBTQ specialized therapy to underprivileged, transgender, non-binary, and two-spirit youth. Right now, we're just in the Florida area. We actually just launched our entire Florida expansion. But we're just a resource there to really provide these mental health services for these kids that don't they're trying to figure themselves out. They don't have a lot of resources. A lot of times it's like you said, you didn't really have an introduction into the trans community. A lot of times think about a 14-year-old who is figuring themselves out, who is discovering that they may be transgender or they may be non-binary, and they're going through all of this and they tell their parents, and it's probably their parents' first introduction to it. It could be their parents' first introduction to the LGBTQ community as a whole, let alone the transgender community. So there's just a lot of unknowns surrounding it. So we're an organization down here in Florida that really steps in to help provide some guidance to get them that first step of therapy. And I can go into that, in a little more deep, but to give you an idea, you said you've been in the industry for 16 years now. I've been in the industry for about 10. I studied risk management and insurance during my undergrad. Got a job right out of college as an underwriter, worked through underwriting. Now I'm still employed in the insurance industry outside of my DE&I efforts, doing claims analytics, and absolutely love it. I'm very much engulfed in the industry, and through those efforts at my own company a few years ago, when we started our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, I really found there's even more of a passion. It was already a passion of ours as we were discussing starting the nonprofit, my family and I, and really working through that. But then seeing the efforts that not only our insurance company is going through, but the insurance industry as a whole, and the finance industry as a whole, and the banking industry. It's something that is getting more attention now. It is getting, and people have questions, but they're afraid to ask those questions. It's something where it's like they had never heard of the term cis, but they also don't want to ask someone, well, what does that mean? What does cisgender versus transgender mean? They don't have someone to ask those questions to. And a lot because it's not talked about. I can tell you. So, you know, what kind of was the catalyst for us starting the FitzLane project was my wife. She came out as transgender publicly a few years ago. And we went through that together. We learned, from the mental health aspect of it to the physical health aspect of it to all of the terms. This was new to all of us. We had to learn from the ground up as well. And it wasn't until we shared her coming out publicly that people actually started coming to us and saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea, but I know my cousin or my niece or my nephew who came out as transgender 6 months ago, but I'm terrified to use the wrong pronouns. I'm terrified that I'll say the wrong thing. I'm terrified that I'll ask the wrong question, because that's probably the biggest response that I get when I talk to people is I'm always scared that I'm going to ask the wrong question. They don't even know how to approach the topic. So that's where a lot of my DE&I efforts throughout the industry as a whole, and coming in and talking to groups during lunch and learns or during DE&I group meetings or whatever the case may be, it gives them a safe space to learn and ask those questions because they don't have that. But funny enough, the number of people that I actually come across that come to me afterwards or message me during and say, I know XYZ person who came out as transgender or non-binary, and this has been amazing because I haven't wanted to ask them those questions and I didn't feel comfortable and I didn't know where to start. So, I mean, just having the awareness that's being brought by the insurance industry now and having the awareness that's coming to say, it's an open space to talk about this at work. It's welcome to share your pronouns on your email signature. It's welcome to share your pronouns on Zoom, whatever the case may be. It's becoming a more inclusive environment. And like anything, it's going to take time, but the industry is acknowledging it. And I think that's huge. And I think that partnering with organizations, has been a big part of that. We've seen financial organizations partner with corporations like the Trevor Project, with large nonprofits to help the LGBT community as a whole. And here in, the Tampa area, we've been privileged to have a ton of corporations partner with us to help trans kids on the ground. So, there's so much to it, and people are wanting to learn because unfortunately the only education that they get is from the news media.
I
That's
was going to
essentially
say,
all they hear.
and you being in Florida, not exactly right, not exactly the friendliest place lately. In fact, just going on what we see in the news, one of the two least friendly places, right, with Texas and Florida, and of course there's some very, very conservative states out there like Wyoming, Idaho, kind of thing, but out of the heavily populated states, Texas and Florida are the ones that are constantly in the news lately,
Yep.
in very anti-trans legislation and it just moves. And yeah, if you're coming from the place that most people are coming from, you truly just have no idea where to even start getting your head around it.
Exactly. Exactly. Because that's all you hear. All you hear are, you know, they refer to them as bathroom politics. That's a big discussion. Sports, that's an even bigger discussion. I mean, And I'll tell you, I did a lot of research into the sports aspect of it because when my wife came out, I didn't fully understand. I said, I have to understand this more. I have to understand the physiology because personally, I came from a sporting background. My wife and I both did. I competed in high school, college. My wife competed internationally. We were heavy into sports our entire life. And to have the sporting conversation, which a lot of times is a big piece of this right now, especially with kids, it's it's something where if you think of it on the surface and you don't know the actual knowledge or the physiology or the hormone levels that go into it, all of this stuff, you may have a very different opinion if you just hear what's said on the news. But if you actually take the time to learn and listen, you realize, like, oh, I never thought about that. The number of times that the phrase that never occurred to me has been uttered after I've had one of these conversations or met with someone individually to talk through some questions that they had, it's just astonishing because they said, I never would have thought of it like that, or I never would have thought of that piece of it. It never occurred to me. And someone asked me one time during one of our meetings and said, well, how would you feel if you were competing as a cisgendered woman? And for those who may be watching, cisgender versus transgender, which means basically I identify as the gender that I was assigned at birth. That's all that cisgender is. And as a cisgender woman who is, I'll say, 5'3.5", I'll add that half in there because that's important to me here. I'm 5'3.5". What if I played basketball and someone said, what if you play basketball and someone who is a transgender woman and who is 6'6" plays up against you? Is that fair? I said, well, let's think about this in two ways. If you're telling me that I'm going to play against a 6'6" transgender woman, she's going to have benefits over me. I mean, I'm 5'3.5", 6'6", instant height difference there. If I was also playing against a cisgender 6'6" woman, there's going to be differences there. It's not like those individuals do not exist. So the height difference, can be with a transgender woman or a cisgender woman. It doesn't matter, and then if I take a step back, they say, well, here's my argument for why you wouldn't want to play against the transgender woman. I said, well, you know what? Technically, I probably have a lot more testosterone pumping through my body than that transgender woman does because her hormones are very heavily regulated. She goes through all of this testing. She goes through, the pain that I see these women go through with whether it's estrogen shots or injections, pills, whatever the case may be. Their hormones are heavily regulated. The hormones going through a 6'6" cisgender woman are not regulated at all. So I'll tell you, I will play against the 6'6" transgender woman all day long because I feel like the 6'6" cisgender woman has more of an advantage over me because it's physiology. That's what it is. Regardless of how someone was born or anything like that, when you think of the other aspects that are introduced in it and that don't get covered by the news or don't get covered by just general people talking about it because they haven't studied it, there's a lot that goes into that. And then, you take in the aspect of kids sports too. Kids are meant to be kids. They want to have fun. I ask my son all the time because he's got long curly hair and people call him a girl all the time. And I said one day, does it bother you that you get called a girl? Because it happens. Long, curly, beautiful hair. And he says, no, not really. And I was like, well, why is that? Well, I'm not a boy. I'm not a girl. I'm just a kid. That's the mindset. And that right there, that simple mindset right there, that's how simple it is. We're all human beings. And that's what a lot of these kids, especially the younger ones that we have the opportunity to work with and provide therapy for, when we get to meet them and talk to them and hear their story, they just want to live their lives. They just want to live their lives, be happy, and grow up to be trans adults. They don't want their lives to stop short because they didn't have the tools and the resources and they were bullied their entire lives and everything else. They just want to be happy like the rest of us. So it's a whole different perspective.
I think that the work you're doing, like providing free therapy, uh, amazing. Let's but I realize it's amazing because I've looked into, right? I've read into how endangered the trans population is without those tools, but I'm guessing the average listener probably hasn't. So could you give us a little why is this work so important for somebody that where their only exposure thus far to trans issues has been just the news. So they really have
Yeah.
not read into it. Why is the mental health side so important?
I mean, it's key. It's key for a ton of different reasons. And if you just look at the statistics, so earlier this year in June, a new survey was brought out, which updated one, I think was from 2016 before. So we're taking post-COVID into effect. We're taking everything that's happened with trans legislation, like you said, across the past 5 years. It's become more of the spotlight. So we have very good data from earlier this year, and I say very good loosely because it's heart-wrenching to see the numbers, but it's in the past year over 50% of kids who identify as transgender, non-binary, two-spirit have seriously considered suicide. So over 50% seriously considered suicide,
And that
which is,
number, I mean, that number is scary on its own, but compared to non-trans youth, I I don't know. I don't know if, even know if we have data, but I'm guessing we're talking 50% to like 2%, maybe less.
yes, a very small number, an extremely small number. And, even the seriously contemplated suicide, and then it jumps to 20% actually attempted suicide. So 1 in 5 kids. So if you look at, two families, each with 2 or 3 kids each, one of those kids actually attempted suicide in the past year, if they all identified as transgender. And I mean, it's gut wrenching to think about that. You look at a class of kids and you look at 20 kids and just imagine if all of those kids were transgender, 4 of them would have attempted suicide in the past year. I mean, that's how vital. And when you talk to these kids, we talk about the bullying aspect, we talk about, everything that's going on in their lives. And they say, and this is pretty consistent between all of them, they say, I don't really get bullied that much at school. It happens. The kids bully me. I get bullied by adults, whether that's on the internet through comments, whether that's parents of their friends, whether that's just random adults on the street. They say they're getting bullied by adults. And I mean, think about if you're a 13-year-old kid. I mean, I can think to when I was 13, I could not imagine going through that and the effects that these kids, when they come to us, we ask them what they want help with, what they want support with. And they have anxiety because they're afraid to go out in public. They have depression because maybe they came out and they lost all of their friends in the process. They're dealing with all of these monumental mental health struggles that adults don't know how to deal with. Who's going through puberty or, has all these other issues. Maybe their parents aren't supportive, and while we're talking about the numbers, you got to think too, it is a very small percentage of the population. I think it was less than 2% of high school students identify as transgender. So we're developing all of these legislation and policies against a very small population, but that population is so endangered when it comes to this. And it's gut wrenching. Very few of these kids have even one supportive adult in their life. And if we can introduce therapy just by having that one supportive adult, it reduces the risk of suicide astronomically. Just having one adult in their life and having that adult be a therapist. Because a lot of times maybe their parents may be supportive to an extent, but they don't fully understand and they're still trying to navigate everything. I mean, it's a huge process coming out. My wife came out at, in her high 20s, and it was a huge process for all of our families as well. It's a lot. And the mental health is really that first step to helping them figure out who they are, work through everything that they're going through, and learn what next steps they need to take as a human being in their lives as they grow.
Does Florida require their parents to approve the mental health or approve them seeing a therapist, or is that something that an underage kid can sign up for?
So Florida does require sign off for individuals under 18. I'll say our definition of youth at the FitzLane Project is 13 to 24. So we do deal with some that are over 18. But for the kids that are under 18, they do need a parent signature. And we've had kids come to us that have not had supportive parents. And we work with them and we end up talking with the parents. And I'll say, I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want tomorrow to come and that change. I get on the phone with every single parent that is not supportive. And I talk to them as a human being, as, a parent to a parent, as an individual who has a loved one who has gone through this process, even though it's not been my child, it's been my spouse. And I've navigated this process from not knowing anything about the transgender community beforehand. And I have a very honest conversation. There's usually a lot of tears involved on both sides. And we have not had one parent not agree to helping their kid, because in the end of it, it's pretty much going to come down, especially if they're in a hostile home environment as well. They're at much higher risk to be one of those 20% that are going to attempt suicide in the next year. And when their parents really sit back and take a step back and realize it's my child getting therapy or the potential of my child not being here anymore, they sign the papers. They want their child to get therapy. And, we come to them and we make sure they know there's no cost to you. There's no hidden cost. There's no copay. You don't have to file with your insurance. You don't have to go through diagnosis codes with your insurance. You don't have to do anything. We'll help them find the therapist. We'll be a matchmaker for them and the therapist to find the perfect therapist for them. We'll help navigate. If you need a support group, we'll help find you a support group. We'll be there for the entire family because we want to help you through this because we know it's not easy.
How do you recruit the therapists to be part of the network?
So what we did was we set up this full network of therapists, and originally we went to therapists that we knew that specialized working with transgender youth. We told them what our organization does, what our plans are for the future, and we asked them to partner with us. And we asked them to partner with us at a discounted rate. Say, we don't have a set rate. We don't say everybody that partners with us has to partner at $75 an hour. We say whatever you feel is fair. And we go to them and we started recruiting therapists. Those therapists started telling the other therapists that they know that work with transgender youth, because it's a very small community and they all know each other. And before we knew it, we were getting applications, one right after the other. And I'll say, I'm extremely thrilled. We just hit 50 therapists on our network in the state of Florida that specialize in transgender youth, and we have them to fall back on. And the most important part, because there are therapists out there, and most of the therapists on our network, they offer free or discounted therapy. That's part of what they offer. If you look, a lot of therapists, they do that. The gap that we saw and what we wanted to solve with our organization was the connection between the therapist and the individual, because all of the research points to that connection between the therapist and the individual is even more crucial than the actual, experience or knowledge that a therapist may have, the technical knowledge. So you could have the best technical therapist in the world, but if you don't connect with them, you're not going to get as much out of therapy as you might with someone who may have been only providing therapy for 5 years, but you have that connection. So we really wanted to help foster that therapist-client connection, and especially when you're dealing with young kids. I mean, just imagine a 14-year-old going to talk with nothing against age here, but going to talk to a 60-year-old therapist who's been doing this for the last 40 years. If they don't connect, then that 14-year-old is going to withdraw. They're not going to get the support that they need. They're not going to feel engaged in their therapy if that's not what they want. And we ask these kids when we have them fill out an application, we say, what are you looking for in a therapist if you don't have one? And I'll give one example. We had someone who came and said, I would like to see a non-binary identifying Asian American therapist. Very specific. But the reason that they wanted to see a non-binary, I think it was non-binary or trans Asian American therapist, was because any therapist that they had worked with before didn't understand the impact that being transgender had with their Asian American heritage. and navigating their family and their culture and everything else. So that was vital to them. And that was what was important. And at the time, we didn't have a non binary Asian American therapist on our network. But what we did have, I think at the time, maybe around 25 therapists on our network. We sent a note to all of our therapists and we said, we have a situation and we don't have a therapist. Here's the criteria. Can you reach out to your networks? And sure enough, within 2 days, we had a non binary Asian American therapist.
So
And it's just amazing to see the community come
yeah,
together.
absolutely. So I'm guessing that intersectionality becomes a gigantic deal with something as complicated and as misunderstood as being trans. Being Latino myself, we my girlfriend and I have had good luck with a therapist that understands Latino families, to help her better deal with my family, especially when they're here for a few weeks at a time. Uh, so I like the fact that the therapist came from the background, understood that the background was really helpful. So I can only imagine with something as complex as trans. So yeah, I can totally see how the right match, the person that they connected and the person that they don't have to spend the first several sessions just helping them understand the context.
Correct.
That makes a lot of sense. On the education side, is it generally the insurance company or the insurance brokerage that's reaching out to bring you into some education, or is it generally the LGBT employee associate group in a particular company, or how do you, who's generally reaching out?
Yeah, so typically what it's been historically is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Everyone calls it something a little bit different. Some add the belonging in on there. Some of them call it their diversity committee. That's usually who initially reaches out because they're looking for whether it's speakers to come in and help educate their group, or they're looking for resources or whatever the case may be. It typically starts there. But what I've seen as a huge benefit and what happened with one of the companies is it started with the diversity group and I spoke with the diversity group. And then it turned into, we're going to open this up company wide. And it's not mandatory, it's for whoever wanted to say. And it was one of the most well attended of outside speaker events that they had that was not directly insurance related because people are interested and they want to learn more, but they don't know how to ask or they don't think to ask until something affects them. And I mean, even something for one of the companies, my own company actually hosted a movie club and we watched a transgender documentary. And that was the highest movie club attendance that I've ever gone to. And it was an amazing discussion. And it's not like everyone on the call was of the same mindset or understanding. Everyone came from a very different place. And we had a very safe space to have these conversations and say, well, these are my concerns and these are my concerns. Well, this is how I feel about your concerns. And there was that dialogue that was created between 25, 30 people on a Zoom call talking about a movie, something as simple as that. So a lot of times it starts with their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And that's how they find me, either through, talking with other DE&I groups. Because what I found is a lot of them discuss. So insurance company A may have a diversity group over here. Insurance company B has one over here who also partners with finance company C over here. And their diversity committees talk. It's a very small world when you, and their diversity officers now, that are in a lot of these companies or directors of diversity, whatever the title may be. So it's a lot of referral based off of that.
Makes sense. Excuse me. For the listeners, if you found the podcast because you're in the getting your head around the basics part of this process, definitely check out the website. I'll include the link on the show notes. It's the FitzLane project, and Fitz, it's with a Z, .org, and then click on education. So I found that the education section, super simple. If you were to print it out, this is probably 2 pages, and it gives you kind of all the basics, to at least start getting your head around, around the what's at least getting your start getting your head around everything you're hearing in the media, basically. So I think that that's a great, probably the best primer that I've happened to run into. So how can people support this effort?
So one is raise awareness. I mean, talking about just the transgender community as a whole not only supports us, but it supports the entire community. So that's what I like to tell people first. That is a easy, free way to do that, as simple as sharing your pronouns on your email signature or your Zoom. Something as simple as that. That opens up the conversation and lets someone know you are a safe person that I can talk to because of something as simple as having your pronouns there. You know, that's a huge part of it. To support our organization, I mean, obviously financial support would be amazing. It helps. I'll tell you right now, it costs us about $1,300 on average to put one kid through therapy. And we give them 13 sessions. They can use it however they want, whatever therapist they want, and we give them the option to renew once a year. So if they go to therapy every other week, they renew once a year, they get 26 sessions. That's an entire year of therapy. No cost to them, no cost to their family. That entire year, 26 sessions, $2,600. We average about $100 per session. So every donation of $100 we get, that provides free therapy for one kid for one session. So there's the opportunity to support financially. There's also the opportunity to help raise awareness. If you would like me or even my wife to come speak, we do speaking engagements all the time. We love going in and just being able to answer questions. And my wife and I laugh because sometimes organizations just want her and her perspective. Sometimes they just want me and my perspective from being an outsider, in this world. And sometimes they want both of us because they want both the perspectives because they're very different. If you're talking with someone who is transgender versus someone who is an ally to the transgender community and a very close ally. So any type of questions or opportunities that they would like to explore with their organization or with a group of individuals, we've gone to meet, local CPCU chapters that have had a diversity event. And we go and we share with them what our organization does. We talk about the transgender community in a very small, intimate setting. There's so many opportunities, but it all centers around raising awareness, having that conversation, and being open to having that conversation because you never know what the other person has going on in their life. Like I said, the number of people that when I say something or they find out that my wife is trans, instantly they turn around and they say, oh my goodness, my cousin just came out as trans 2 weeks ago and this happened. I can't tell you the number of times. Or we did an event with the yoga studio and someone came to us in need. And I said, well, how did you hear about us? Well, I was talking to a friend of mine who was at yoga, who was talking to our instructor, who was wearing one of your This Shirt Helps Trans Kids t-shirts. And it went through 5 people, but they found out about us through that. And we were able to help them and their family. So just talking, raising awareness, being open to the conversation, being open to learning, going to the education page of our website just to learn what does it mean to be transgender? What does it mean to be non-binary? What is gender dysphoria that I keep hearing about? Just those basics are huge.
CPCU chapters, it's a no-brainer. So listeners, many of you are active in your local CPCU chapters. So suggest the idea. Chapter leaders, guaranteed people are confused about it, because if I'm confused about it, and I'm very involved in the DEI space, most of our industry is confused about it. The t-shirts, I don't see them on the website right now. Are they still available?
They are not on there. Actually, a newer thing that our organization does. I'm wearing one. This is our most popular one. The Shirt Helps Trans Kids t-shirt, for those who may be listening. We are going to be putting them on our website. We actually did a test run because it was really important to me to find an organization to support, not go mass production or anything like that. And we were able to locate a small transgender owned printing company who does the screen printing and everything by hand. It's called Transfigure Print Co. We went with them. We did a test of 50 shirts, and then we did a test of another amount of shirts for a local printing company down here in Florida. And people absolutely love them. So we will be putting them on our website. Hopefully soon. We have to get a new order because we have almost sold out. I think we have a few extra smalls left, and that's about it. But they will be on our website. If you're interested in one, though, feel free to reach out to us and we can see what we have on hand and send them out. But I'm hoping to get those out soon, as soon as we receive more in the mail. But yeah, happy to support. It's important to us. We want to support the community because it's, it's a very small, tight-knit community, and it's a lot of times very difficult for adults in the trans community to get work. A lot of them are unemployed, a lot of them are underemployed, a lot of them are homeless, and have to turn to types of income streams that they don't want to. So we want to support wherever we can.
Historically, huge overrepresentation of trans people in unemployed, homeless. So yeah, I completely understand. Thank you so much for your time. When this goes live, I will tag the organization and tag you, and to the listeners. This is in everything indicates that just like LGBT issues 20 years ago, this is not going to go away because they've always been here, and finally they're getting less ignored in society is a good way to put it, and that means that this is not a temporary issue. We need to learn how to handle this better. So Alivia, thank you very much for your time.
Yes, and thank you, Tony, and everyone listening for your time listening to this and being willing to learn and just be open to it, because that's a big part of it. So thank you for the opportunity as well.
Thank you.